Alright, what the fuck's up, everybody? What's going on? You know who it is. I don't know why I say that. Thanks for watching. Too many people over and over again saying that shit. But, alright, so, in my last video, what the fuck was I talking about? What the fuck did I mean by fight God? Why do we have to fight God? What is that, like something satanic? You're fighting God, you're gonna kick God's ass, you don't believe in God? No. If you're fighting God, obviously it's implied that you believe in God, because otherwise you would have nobody to fight. So, boom. Second of all, let's say Christianity, God, whatever the case is, you are programmed to believe that you have no control of your life. God has a plan for you and you gotta follow that plan. But, you know, you go through college and they make you pick what you want to be when you're older, and it's like, well, doesn't God already have a plan for me? Am I ultimately just going to do God's plan? Why should I have to pick? But anyways, we won't get into that. But that's what's going on. So you have to, you know, God has his plan for you. It's a divine plan. It knows all. It's important. What I'm saying is, if you want to begin spirituality, instead of holding on to that, instead of trying to be a witch or an atheist who believes in Jesus or believes in Christianity or Christian or whatever the case is, instead of that, instead of trying to bring Jesus into your culture because you feel bad, because, okay, well, maybe not a Christian anymore, but, you know, my mom, my dad, or my family, my wife, or whoever's, if I explain to them that I just see Jesus in a better way, or Jesus is part of my thing, and Jesus really was a magician, or whatever the case is, then they won't be so mad. Or maybe that's some internal conflict within you because you still believe Jesus is a real person. So what I'm telling you to do is to fight that. Is God ultimately holds the keys to your life, your freedom, your kingdom. God's got those keys. And it's not necessarily the all mind, what I believe is like the real God. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this program, this thought form, this belief system of Jesus, of God, of Christianity. This thing, you have to fucking kick that thing's ass. But this is what will happen. Once you do, he lets you free. He lets you go by. Who knows? Maybe it's actually a step we're supposed to do. Maybe Christianity was, I mean, I'm not going to say it was created for this, because there's a lot of people that died at their hands, so that'd be a terrible thing for me to say that, well, maybe it's there for a reason to make everybody evolve. It's like, well, that's pretty insensitive when you figure how many people died for that thing to become born, so I'm not going to go there. But what I will say is, Christianity, whenever you're in it, you believe in something as a kid, it molds you, whatever, it starts programming you. From there, you stop believing in it, and then you're in this state of like, what the fuck, what do I know, what's going on? This is opening your root chakra, I think, is associated to this. When you start doing this, when you start going through fear-based media and you're realizing that a lot of the things you were taught aren't accurate or true, that kind of thing happens. And then from there you gotta start creating your own beliefs. But if there wasn't enough time, if you haven't disassociated with Christianity, with Jesus, or whatever religion or programming that is stopping you from evolving, okay, if you haven't separated long enough from it, well, whenever you get to the next level, you're going to carry that with you. So here's something I want people to know. A lot of people say, oh, these people, these new agers, these magical people that talk about Jesus and say there's significance in the Bible, it's like they're just programmed. They're just programmed to say that, and they're still just trying to bring Jesus along for the ride so they don't feel bad. It's like, no, that's not my case. That's not what I did. Anybody who thinks that about me hasn't watched my content. So here's my deal. I've got lots of videos about dissing Jesus. You know, like in the song The Magician. Shaman or priest, it's all the same. The magician is my name. Kick the sand in Satan's face, I'll put Jesus in his place. Shaman or priest, it's all the same. The magician is my name. This is what separates me from shamanism, from other things, okay? And I think witchcraft also does this. Ceremonial magic, all these things do this. So
Flame, and I teach the holy gates, teach the secret of the
like to go to older religions. The older the better. If it's been around for a long fucking time, then it's holds weight and all that, and I get that. Sorry, people walking by. I'm at Walmart. Fucking the devil's in Walmart. No, so what I'm saying, where was I fucking going? Oh yeah, so yeah, shaman or priest, it's all the same. Magician's my name. So the future in the rooms. Anyways, that's a great song, by the way. And Bruce Dickinson is a ceremonial magician. He definitely practices these things. He's got a demonic sigil on one of his CD covers. And this demonic sigil has been used by a vast, I would say in the hundreds of music artists have this incorporated in their logos and their symbols and their CDs, whatever the case is, over and over again on their websites, all that shit. I think it's a form of payment because people think demons or whatever. But point is, shamanism, all these older religions have a good base, a good root. Even Christianity, for God's sakes, takes from the older religions and made that book. That's what I believe. But my religion, my spirituality, because I'm not a religion, my spirituality, if I'm being taken to a court of law, I'm a Wicca, because they have spiritual rights. I don't think shamanism, animism, being a witch or being a ceremonial magician, none of those have religious rights. I could be wrong, but so I become a Wiccan at that point. But I'm not a Wiccan per se. And what I like about ceremonial magic is because this is what people do. They look at shamanism, they look at, their type of astrology, whether it's Vedic or tropical. They look at the wisdom from the older people, from the older tribes, and then they try to take in their symbolism and make it current. Some things can't be made current. But what happens when a religion or old spiritualities are studied by people with high level intellects and maybe have the ability to speak to spirit or whatever the case is, and know how to meditate and all this and do a lifetime of study? Well, it's like someone like Gerald Gardner. He makes up the Gardnerian tradition with everything he learned. He's traveled the world studying all these different types of form of spirituality / religions, and then he makes up his own, which incorporates all that, which I think a lot of witches forget. They think his religion is just solely his religion, but he's taken things from everywhere and made his own. Golden Dawn, which is a lot of the magic that I do, is systems from the Golden Dawn. There's a lot of things from the Rosicrucian that I use. This is why I use various spiritualities. But what I'm trying to say is, ceremonial magic might be old, it might be Solomon and all that, but it's not as old as some of these older traditions. And more importantly than that, we've taken that in the last 50 years and made it something even newer, more modern. People keep fine-tuning it, whereas Christianity, they do that to a certain extent, where it's like, okay, well, you can't get divorced, and then they'll change the rule in divorce because when it comes to their money, it's like, well, people aren't going to come to your religion anymore if they can't do this. Then they change the rules, but for the most part, the shit's been the same forever. Believe in Jesus and you're saved. Believe in Jesus and you're saved. If you hear the good news, fucking Jesus is real. All that shit, it's all been overplayed. Whereas other spiritualities that are able to adapt and become more modernized and teach in a way such as that, then it's using our brain or intellect in the smartest way, shape, or form. So I'm not interested in battles of is shamanism older than ceremonial magic, or shamanism better than fucking witchcraft. I'm not interested in any of that, because I don't give two fucks which one's older. I care about what works. Shamanism may have been around for many years, and here's one thing I don't think I've ever said out loud about this, but what I believe is the Mayans and there's Vikings. You heard it in Agartha. There's a Viking clan or tribe that completely disappeared off the face of the planet. maybe they evolved. Maybe they evolved so much that they revolved themselves off the planet. Evolved and revolved, you know. You gotta revolve to evolve. Everything is revolutions. That's a revolution. A revolution is how many times you go. RPM, revolutions per minute. It's how many times your fucking crankshaft spins, which makes your pistons go up and down through the fucking block of the fucking car. No, that's what revolutions are. Revolution isn't just changing something old and turning into something new. I mean, if anything, the revolution is always the same, but every different quarter of that revolution, you can split a circle in 4 or in half. Or you get complicated like the moon, how she splits the fucking moon. That's pretty cool too. Anyways, I'm way off what I'm trying to talk about, but the point of what I'm trying to say is whether shamanism is the oldest, these Germanic tribes, they're the oldest ones, whether witchcraft was first or all these paganisms were first and they were stolen by Christianity, I agree with that. But what I like is ceremonial magic and the newer witchcrafts and witches and the people I listen to. This is why chaos magic to me is cool, because they take magic ideas that work and they change it, but they don't change procedure more or less, but they change the things that are adaptable within the rituals. So meaning, like, if you have to do a sigil, well, you can't do a sigil without drawing, right? So that has to stay. But maybe the rules in how you draw the sigil, like maybe before it was like no vowels, no double consonants. Well, now maybe you can do vowels. Maybe it's not such a big deal. Maybe those little details don't matter. And that's what chaos magic does. So instead of getting hung up on all these little fucking details that'll just cross you up and make you get all fucked up because you think, oh fuck, maybe I left a fucking consonant in that sigil and that's why it doesn't work. It's like, man, it would have worked if you just would have let it go and just let it go in there. Overthinking is one of the main ways magic gets fucked. But nonetheless, shamanism and all these things. Oh yeah, some of the Vikings, I'm pretty sure they evolved off the fucking planet. If the whole tribe did disappear, there's no way they got wiped out because someone would have took credit for that. I think they evolved out of here. So there's something to shamanism. And the people that evolve out of here, just like the people that have different beliefs, are no longer here. So all the beliefs that we have today within us are handed down or written in books. Because the people that had beliefs that they didn't write down in books, or, you know, whatever the case is, or then handed down generation to generation, well, when they died off, the tradition died off with them. But spiritual knowledge can be accessed by anybody. And this is why you don't need to follow going on the internet and looking up shamanism and learning up how these people did these things in the past, and learning about their myths and all that is super beneficial, and it's going to help you out in a million ways. But if every day you're going back online to hear the same stories over and over again, unless you're programming your mind, why haven't you started the rituals and the shit they told you to do? Now you're just gonna battle and say why your shit's better, because eventually you're gonna get bored of that and then you're gonna start looking at other stuff instead of starting the fucking work. But to me that doesn't matter. It matters what works. The Golden Dawn traditions of ceremonial magic, Carol Polk Runyon, I forget what his is, but there's so many different magics that work out there. So many. And that tells me something. It doesn't matter if you're rooted in an old tradition or the newest tradition that came out, whether you think it's Abrahamic or not, whether I'm using Abrahamic religion, God names in my ceremony, doesn't matter. I'm not calling on those forces and asking those forces to allow me to accept the love of Jesus. I'm not doing that. I'm using those names because people have made them a holy thing. And by using that, it brings energy into the sphere where I'm working. See, when you carve your circle out, it's not a circle. It's a fucking, like, a globe around you. Everybody is their own personal center of the universe. You are a center of the universe. You're not the center. You're a center of the universe. Like Peterson said. Oh, well, all right. Where to go from all that? Well, first off, I'll start off by saying I threw up those things for you on there about Bruce Dickinson. And if you're wondering what the sigil was, in case you want to try it, that's a sigil, but don't work with demonic spirits. When I say demonic spirits, I don't think they're necessarily evil, but they are something that you have to also contend with. And I guess it all depends on what's going on in your life and why you would consider doing something like that when there's no really need to. You can perform magic whether or not you decide to deal with demons. Some people are drawn to that kind of thing. Some people want to explore that. Some people have a curiosity they can't control. And, people don't take that into account when they start talking about their tradition. And they want everybody to take their tradition. You know what I mean? And, there's too many variables to get into that. But I guess that when I was talking about the sigil magic and chaos magic, sigil magic might have been something that it's prominently done in chaos magic, but a lot of people in witchcraft have taken it up. Ceremonial magicians have taken it up. I don't know where it originates. I know the sigils from Solomon are called that, and Solomon is in the Old Testament, so make of that as you will. He might have stole that from older traditions, but you don't really hear of too many. I don't know, I've never heard too many shamans talk about sigils, but maybe they do, and I'm just not privy to it, so that's fine. But the point is, sigil magic is a type of magic, because even with Solomon making those sigils, he's got a sigil for the demons, how to call those demons and control those demons and get them to knock off their shit. Because this is another thing of why you need to wrestle with God, because if you allow God into your life in the way of the Bible is the truth and the way, and it's real and all this shit, Jesus has to save you, well, you start believing in everything in that Old Testament book. You allow that programming in your mind, and there's demonic spirits. You can be possessed by demons and all that, so you think, whatever the case is. Well, now, if your fear of those spirits are very strong at night, well, then you can accidentally get something to happen, because what you focus on expands. So the only reason to get into that is if you are highly programmed from Christianity, or you're drawn to it and you just want to dabble in it to see what's going on. And dabble is the wrong word. If you're going to go down that road, do not fucking dabble. There's too many stories out there about ceremonial magicians not being very far in their initiation, or even past their initiation, but not completely ready to take that step, and going too far and thinking they're going to summon a demon to do whatever and getting fucked up. So that's all up to you. That's a personal choice. I choose not to. I choose not to do demonic evocation. Not at this time anyways. I don't see the need to. Whenever I can simply either make a sigil, or simply write on a candle, or reprogram my mind by listening to a fucking recorder with specific hypnotic suggestions, hypnotic language patterns that I speak on my thing that I've learned, and I listen to that while I put myself into an alpha state, and then whenever I slowly get into the theta state before sleep, those things are going to go right into my mind. And it can be as simple as that. No actual ritual magic required. And that's why I say you can look into the past and you can dig up all the shamanic and pagan and old fucking ways that people did things that were relevant for their time and had reasons to do that in their time. You can do all that, and you could probably find your way out of it. But if you don't add your personal touch to it, or make it good for you, or whatever the case is, well, I don't know how it'll work out for you. It might work out great, it might not. But it might be more work than it's worth, because there's so much out there. Chaos magic. One of the stories I like the most is by, I think it's Phil Hine. I could be wrong about that. Phil Hine, he made a whole deity pantheon using the Star Trek characters. And he did this as an experiment to prove a point. So all the deities we call on, all the deities that were ever existed, and this comes back to the thing I was about to say about Solomon, and then I got sidetracked. But he made a pantheon of all the deities. Sorry, he made a pantheon of deities, but they were actually all the Star Trek characters. And he designed a sigil for them, and he made them programming, and the programming suited what the characters did on the Star Trek TV shows, movies, so on and so forth, books, whatever the case is. So Spock maybe was probably, I don't know exactly, okay, so, but let's say Spock, because I don't know much about Star Trek. I've only ever watched the newer movies, so I don't want to insult anybody. But let's say Spock was for, abnormal intelligence, being wise, being able to think very intelligently, maybe to impress people. Lieutenant Uhura would be for whatever she was good at. Captain Kirk would be for, being able to think ahead, to be able to even outsmart potentially Spock. Spock to me would be more like of an air sign, how he's so smart, but he can fight because he's so smart. But then Kirk to me seems more like a fire sign because he's got that fire and he's a leader, like a Leo, whatever, shit like that. Anyways, doesn't matter. Aurora, maybe she's more like the moon, maybe she's more like Venus, who knows? But he assigned and made programming for all these things that you could call on them, and it worked. And it worked. And George Carlin is a comedian, and he talks about how he stopped calling on God, praying to God, because God only answered 50% of his prayers, and he decided to believe in something more like the sun, because you can actually see the sun instead of some fictitious character in a fucking book. And then he said, but he's like, 50% of the time I'd get what I want, 50% of the time I wouldn't get what I want. He's like, but when I started calling on Joe Pesci for specific things, I got results. Things that I called God on for, fucking wouldn't answer me. Call Joe Pesci, you'd fucking come over and he'd handle that motherfucker with a bat. Take that as you want. It's a comedy, but nonetheless, he's like semi-explaining how you can create thought forms, you can create deities, you can use something that's already constructed. This is why you can use your ancestors for things, because your ancestors are here to help you, especially if you keep them alive with photos and whatever else all around you. Nonetheless, the point of all that was, when you start studying thought forms and how to create thought forms, and then when you read something like Solomon, who contained the demons in the brass vessel, okay, the 72 poetic demons. Some were pretty nasty, some were, very deceitful, some of them were very nice and cordial. Some of them even seem like they might want to help you. Some of them seem like they want to help you, but they're straight up lying to you. Some of them are just straight up, I want to eat you, I want to kill you, I want to fucking inhabit your soul, shit like that. Do I have first-hand knowledge? Not exactly, and I'm not going to get into that. I had a stage where I thought it was something I wanted to do, and I think it was mostly because I just wanted a sword. So then I just started designing swords and taking machetes and taking my grinder to them and making them a double-edged machete and making them small swords, and ended up being that satisfied my need, and I no longer wanted to look up that stuff. But I did a lot of research before I just dove in, and I had all the books on my phone and no longer do. But point is, it can almost be argued that because if you create a book and you create symbols in that book for specific deities, and you give the deities programming, meaning if you call on Jesus, he will save you. If you call on this demon, he will give you this knowledge, or he will give you this, but you have to give him payment, which people are misconstrued. They think they have to give up their soul for shit. But I don't know what maybe Bruce Dickinson may have did, but he's got that sigil on a CD case, and maybe that's enough. Maybe it's just for the world to see that, and maybe that's just for a way for people to get that sigil in their mind, for that demon to manifest within their life. Who fucking knows? I don't fucking know. I'm not gonna pretend I fucking know. But what I do know is that the payment isn't necessarily like your fucking soul, or even cutting your wrist and putting blood on shit. It can be simply, so whatever you decide, you have to be in the moment, and you have to be dealing with that spirit to really know what the hell's going on. So if you deal with that spirit, and whether you actually get thoughts, premonitions, and see them, because evocation, you can have conjurations and things appear. However, if you're not at that level yet, and you speak to something like that, and then you start getting thoughts right after of the things that demon likes, well then that's the shit you would have to give up to, and that's kind of my experience. But like I said, I didn't get deep into it, and I decided against it. because there's so much practicality and so many other ways you can simply get a suggestion into the subconscious to filter down into whatever, the unconscious, whatever you want to fucking use. I don't think that model's correct, but anyways. And it will manifest in your fucking life. And it's that simple. I mean, making a sigil doesn't take any time. And there's no deity worship, there's no making a pact with anything. You simply make a symbol of something you want. You look at it, you meditate on it, or you jerk off and get it shot right in your subconscious mind. You gotta wait around for it to happen, and it will happen. The only thing is, if you don't have a great line of communication, it might take a while for that to happen. And that's where doing a magical tradition, doing ritual, is going to be beneficial, because everything that goes along in my ritual, in my tradition, is there to make all these things happen faster. So the whole initiation grade is doing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the middle pillar. You start off with the Kabbalistic cross after you fucking carve out your fucking circle, which is your sphere of protection all around you. And you're doing these things to purify your area, to purify your being. You first start off by doing the banishing part of the lesser banishing, and then you do the invoking part of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. So when you do the first banishing part, you're banishing all the harmful and negativity out of your air body, or air aspect. Let's call it maybe the mental body, but the air part of your body, of all your organs, of everything. And then you're banishing all those negative and whatever negativity and harmful energies and entities that are in your fire body, your passion, your action, what allows you to take action and shit like that. Well, if you have a bunch of negative whatever energy within that part of you, well, this is why you banish that. And then you do that same thing in the water, your emotional body, and then you do the same thing in your physical body, right, earth. And then you do the middle pillar, which draws down energy from the cosmos, from the all mind, the creator of everything, that connects everything into your being. And then from there, if you're doing my tradition, you do a meditation on one tarot card every single fucking day. You also do a meditation on a single point on the wall for as long as it takes for you to get a bunch of information just from that. And instead of trying to empty your thoughts completely, you are focusing on one thing. And every time your attention gets off that one thing, you bring it back to that one thing. It's a concentration meditation that allows you to be able to focus on one thing at a time and get all the information you need from that one thing, so that when you go and meditate, you can meditate on one thing and get all the information you need. You need to train and practice at these things, and then it becomes beneficial to do these things. But if all you've been doing is trying to empty out your mind and let things come to you, well, then when you try to focus on one thing, depending on how you are, I can't speak for everybody, but when I tried doing that at the beginning, especially being someone who's got attention deficit disorder, deficiency, whatever, ADD disorder, it was very hard to just empty out my mind, because I've got so much in my mind. It was much easier for me to focus on one thing, and then you focus on the fucking meditation of the card also. Anyways, all this helps. And then after all that, you do the invoking of the pentagram. And when you first do it, you're invoking, you read the book, it tells you exactly what you're invoking. But where I am now, when I do this part of it, I invoke something specific, and generally, if I don't have anything I'm working on for manifesting anything, then I just invoke maybe the god of the day's attribute. So if it's Tuesday, then that would be fire. If it's, but regardless, you're invoking, let's say, positive energy, positivity rather, or joy, or you're invoking financial abundance, or wealth, health. You want to invoke the ability to be able to be decisive, not indecisive, decisive, or have discipline, or be able to be assertive if you're not so assertive. If you're somebody who doesn't have any fire in your chart, maybe you want to invoke fire. But the point is that is your initiation phase. You do that from 6 months. 6 months is what it says in the book. 12 months is what Frater suggests. 10 to 12 months. I did it for the 12 as well, and I did it double. But that's designed so that when you are calling things to you, you are calling things to you in a specific spot, so that whenever you go out there, and you're becoming depolarized, you're doing grounding techniques as well, and you're syncing up with the sun and the moon, and you're syncing up with nature, okay? This is all other little exercises you do within this curriculum. But you're doing all this simultaneously within your initiation. So then when you start going through the earth grade, it's very easy for you to fix your health and your wealth, because you did that for 6 months to 12 months. You banished all the negative, harmful energy around you. You banished all your own negative self-talk that you've been saying for years, which ended up being curses on you, making negative thought forms that are around you that keep you in these modes that are, you're stuck in these modes. You got stuck in these ways because you created all this around you, because you have power that you have no idea about. So this 6 to 12 months, and I think that's one of the major reasons why for it's just 12 months, because it might take longer, depending on how old you are. If you have a lifetime of creating negative thought forms around you and saying negative talk and all this, it might take longer for you to banish those every day, especially if you didn't do it every day like you're supposed to. But, and then now you have a purified room, you have a purified temple room, which everything on your temple is an aspect of your mind, of the astral. You know what I mean? So you live out your physical life, but then you have this temple room, and this temple room is where you go into the astral. Everything in the astral has to filter down here. This is a symbolic representation of that. So you go into your mind there, and this is why when you're in this room, you're projecting yourself in the cosmos, which is like in your mind, in the astral, astronomy, astrology, Astarte, you know, all these things, a star, it's all astral. And this is your mind, okay? The astral is governed by the moon. It's why the moon is one of the most important planets to deal with. You know, Mercury is the messenger of the gods, but everything has to be filtered through the moon, because that's your subconscious, that's your link to the divine. That's why I think the witchcraft component is very important when you're doing ceremonial magic, because you really got to understand Diana, or Aradia, or Artemis, or Iana, or, well, depending if you think Isis is the moon, or if you think more like Mary is the moon. Like I said before, Mary's blue like the moon, and the mother like the moon, but she's also in the month of May, which is ruled by Venus. Well, April to May is Venus, and, you know, it's Taurus anyways, it's Earth, which is also Venus. So anyways, all that aside, that's why you do a curriculum like this, because then you can do magic, call things to you without having to worry about fucking things getting in the way. You don't have to worry about people having psychic attack on you, because you got this shit. If you do the work, there's no need to worry about any psychic attack. You don't have to worry about your own self-negative talk, because even if you do indulge in self-negative talk from time to time, which part of the curriculum makes you not do that anymore, but even if you do indulge in that from time to time, you're going to banish it when you go do your lesser banishing, either the same day or the next day. So it's regardless, you know. And it's just so, and this is what I'm talking about. I don't know what the shamanism rituals are. I don't, so I can't speak on them. And I'm using that specifically because I know enough different witchcrafts and different things like that, and I have seen things that handle these aspects. But I don't know what they are, but I know that what I do was created fairly new. And it was because it took older spiritualities and decided to make them more current and design it in a way that is the most beneficial for the less amount of work. And so it works. And like I said, the words that we're using, all the old god names, are in the Old Testament, which means it's not in the New Testament, which was predominantly what Christianity is. They accepted the Old Testament because it's a precursor to the New Testament, but the Old Testament is way different from the New Testament. So the words we're using are in the Old Testament, and like I said in my last video, with the Solomon sigil that looked like the thunder wheel that the Thunder Wizard had, which that one is like super old, like I said, 5 or 6 figures like old in history. Well, then Solomon took that from him, or whoever created the Bible, who created the character Solomon and these demons, and wanted to see if they can create these demons and all this shit, and made these thought forms, stole that from another tradition. So who knows? And maybe at one point, anyways, doesn't matter. But I mean, that's not in the Bible. Sorry, so I'm kind of getting my shit confused. But that part's not in the Bible. But Solomon's in the Bible, and then Solomon has his own books, the Key of Solomon and shit like that. But the point I'm trying to get at is the Old Testament is potentially from older pagan religions and shit and different things. So by us using them, we're tapping into older spiritualities. refined, and it doesn't matter. That's why I say when I do a candle for whatever planet it is, I use every pantheon name for a deity who is associated with the Roman name, but the Roman name is more popular now, so there's more energy in that. Understand that magicians are interested in manipulating energy. We want to cause change and conformity with our will. Okay, that's what magic is. We are magicians. We use magic to conform our reality with our will. You know what I mean? That's what we are doing. So we're going to use the things that have the most energy. We're not just going to say, oh, hey, well, the Bible was used to control people. Correct, you're right. The Bible is really not a way to save people. You're right. But if we use certain God names that everybody believes are the names of God and put power in that and won't even say them because they're so holy, if we go around saying them, then we can harness all that fucking power and use that power to our advantage. And, you know, if you're against Christianity, it's probably the best way to get back at them. You want to listen to Thunder Wizard. He likes to say that people, like I said, and I don't want to diss him because I think he's got a lot to offer, and I think he'd be well served if you watched all his videos. I'll just put that out there. I really do. And that's why I've done it. I didn't watch all his videos yet, but I started going back through it when I'm not currently learning something or doing something or I need to know something. That's what I put on. I put on Thunder Wizard. Anyways, shit. But when he starts talking, and he starts getting into people that take in Jesus and their religion and all that, and he's probably right. It's probably because they have some programming and they're mad or scared about using Jesus' name in vain and doing these things that they were programmed that were from the devil all this time. He's probably right about that. But he talks about the church doing a mind fuck on people, which they did, and making you feel like a piece of crap, and that's why you need God and Jesus, and you need to accept him. And he's not wrong. That's all correct. But when I watch Jordan Peterson teaching about the Bible, or any teaching, just like Frederick Xavier, just like other people, I feel empowered. You know, I feel like I'm not a piece of shit. I can do this. You know what I mean? Like Peterson, I really see a lot of magic in his words. Maybe that's just because my mind is magic oriented, so I can pull magic out of anything. But I really see it, and that's why, like, he started talking about the Bible, and that's why I said, wow. Frederick Xavier started saying it, and then Peterson started saying it. I was like, okay, well, maybe there really is power in this Bible that you can use and draw from. And it's the Old Testament I use, not the New Testament, not the Jesus part. But and once again, all those bad parts about what they do, taking on women after they fucking conquered a land and killed everybody and all that, and that's because Jehovah or Yahweh told them to do that and all that stuff. Well, then, okay, that's fine. That shit's bad, but we can also learn from that. We can learn that that's what happens when you become a religious zealot asshole who's self-righteous, that you risk this part. The point I'm trying to make is I watched Thunder Wizard, and I like it. He's comical, especially when he starts going after somebody and all that. And, you know, I even played the video where he came after me on here, you know, to prove that, you know, it is what it is. But sometimes I get the feeling when I watch him that I'm a piece of shit, that he's got the answers and I need to buy his programs for the answers. And not always. A lot of the times most of the times he'll refer people to his older videos, to learn from his older videos. And, you know, if you don't do that, then you won't know exactly where he stands from. So he's not wrong on that set. Credit where credit's due. So anyways, I'm not trying to diss Thunder Wizard, but, you know, I know the Catholic Church tears people down and tries to tell everybody they have the way, and they're like going around, and other churches do this too, and they're like going around telling people that, you know, they're above them, and this is why the religion's wrong. And I find that Thunder Wizard does that sometimes with other spiritualities. Go around saying why other ones are wrong and his is right. And you know that he did all this stuff and he knows a lot of this stuff. And it's not always the case, because I've seen him be very humble. So I'm not trying to knock him down. But, you know, if you don't know something about a specific type of religion, then don't say anything, because you don't know anything about it. Like, that's why I try not to judge shamanism, because I think there's probably a lot of power in there. And I don't do it because for some reason I'm not drawn specifically to the shaman way. And maybe it's my ancestors, maybe it's all that, but the way I found works, and it works great. And I'm making these videos just to, I don't know, work things out in my head. Maybe it's because I like to talk. Maybe it's because I got the moon and Venus and Gemini. I got Mars and Neptune over there in Capricorn. No, Sagittarius. I got Saturn and Uranus in Capricorn, or vice versa, whichever. If it's Sag before Capricorn, or it's Capricorn, yeah, Sag before Capricorn, and then it's Aquarius, where I have Jupiter in the 12th house, but in Aquarius. Anyways, doesn't matter. And Mercury's, anyways, doesn't matter. Point of all this was to grapple with God. What does that mean, to grapple with God? Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm grappling with God. I'm taking the beliefs that I was taught about God, and I'm throwing them in the fucking garbage. And I make up my own, my new beliefs. And I don't let anybody tell me what God is or isn't. Not the Thunder Wizard, not Jordan Peterson, not the fucking Bible, not even Frederick Xavier, not Birch, not Ralph Smart, not anyone I fucking listen to does get to tell me who the fuck God is. I'm alive. I'm in this realm. I know who I am. Well, I'm trying to figure out who I am. And I meditate, and I get answers, and I have a connection because I've made things happen. And believe me, don't believe me, it doesn't matter to me. But I'm grappling with God. I'm wrestling with the God. With the gods. Polytheism is a real thing. But whether it's one main source, and then there's all these sub-sources, who knows? I think there's so much reality to the 7 planets. You know, the other ones are great too, the other 3, you know, they're needed too for other things, but they're bigger. But on a day-to-day basis, if you get in touch with these 7 energy sources, these planets, these deities, these gods, whatever they are, gods and goddesses, you get in touch with that, you can do things. Likewise, the earth that we live on, if you just get in touch with that one alone, if you were to use the concept of a male god or all-father and a female goddess that we live on, and the two are together is where you come from, you could just get so much wealth and information from that. Problem is, we can't understand what we don't see. We can only conceptualize and deify and personify and all that other shit. So that's what we do. And it's interesting because, you know, there's, in the planets, there's 2 girl planets, and then there's, 5 other guy planets up there, right? Well, every girl can have babies, but not every guy has babies, and that's, seems to be the case. So there's a majority of men that have most of the kids, and it's like 1 out of every 2 men has kids, and the other one doesn't. That's like a straight stat, okay? Still wait, it fucking works. For whatever reasons, who knows? But almost every woman has a kid. Not everyone, but almost everyone. And it's like a 98% of women have children. And at one point, it was always 2 or more. You know, very seldomly do they only have 1 child. Nowadays, it's at least 1 child. This is why you have more women than men ancestors. That's why there's more women on the planet. That's why women maybe live longer, because there's more of them, so they're able to. Who knows? But I just gotta. Anyways, so to conceptualize the one God, we break it down into these 7 planets that we can actually see if we want to, up in the sky. But we break them down into these 7 energies. There's 2 female and 5 male. Why is that? Well, females are more balanced than males, so you need more male deities to explain the one God source, and less female ones to explain the God source. And females have their issues, of course they do, but in my opinion, in my estimation, you know, the reason why girls don't go for power as much is because they know they're powerful and they don't need to go grab it. Whereas us, if we feel inferior, we try to grab for power. It's like the little yappy dog and the big dog that doesn't bark at all. The big dog knows it can kill the little dog, so it just shuts up. The little dog's got to make this big show. I know everything. I'm fucking smart. My tradition this, and I've done this, and blah, 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 blah. You ever meet those guys that fought, did this and did that, and they can kill your ass by just touching a part on your neck or your temple? It's like, yeah, keep talking. The guy who's actually hurt people, maybe even put people in the hospital or killed them, doesn't say anything. I mean, you know not to mess with them, whereas the guy running his mouth is the guy you're just like, yeah, okay, bud. And most people don't have the heart to tell him to fuck off and shut up, and we know you're lying. but everybody knows he's an asshole behind his back. He's just a fucking fraud. That's as far as I'll take that. But that's why I think the planets are like that. There's, you know, more male than female, but it's a way to represent the main god. And I'm not saying this is all symbolic, but symbolism is something you need to understand. Whether everything is just symbolic and all you need to do is symbolically get something in your mind to really have success, or if symbolism is the language of these gods and is the way to talk to them is to do symbolism, either way, you're right and it works. So just do the symbolism. Stop studying why. And, you know, because the more you just study and bring up facts and theory, it's just, you just armchair occultism. If you do the work, you'll find out what works, and then you can come out here and say, hey, this is what I do and this is what works. And if you do it, you'll get whatever, and people come out here and debate with you and say you're wrong and this and that and this is why you're wrong and all that all day long, and it really doesn't matter. And I know I've done that, so I'm guilty of that too. So far from perfect, but always trying to be closer every day. That's my slogan. But wrestle with God. You gotta wrestle with God. You gotta figure out what God is to you and the goddess. And don't let anybody tell you what it is or isn't. Don't let somebody break down your beliefs. You can watch the Thunder Wizard. You can watch Frater. You can watch Birch. You can watch anybody. I don't know anybody else's name but those guys who teach spirituality. Ralph even. But, you know, don't let them tell you what to believe in. You know, Birch will go out there and tell you not to vote Republican. And maybe that pisses you off because that's who you want to vote for. So you have trouble listening to him. I had a guy come on here telling me I was a bad person because I was dissing Thunder Wizard. But he was really a Christian and said Thunder Wizard was his friend. In the way, if you watch the video, it's an older video of mine. But I broke it down and told him, but the reason you're attacking me is because you can't go tell a Thunder Wizard that you like his shit, but it bugs you that he talks about Christianity the way it does because you are a Christian. And so instead of doing that, you're coming attacking me because maybe Thunder Wizard will see it and be all happy that you fucking honored him by doing that and be like, you know what, you're a cool Christian, I won't knock you. You know, so you're trying to fucking, you know, I don't even know. I forget how I explained it, but, you know, you're coming to attack me. And I told him simply, go talk to the guy, man. You got an issue because you like him, but you know he hates a part of you. Simple as that. And the same thing goes to that guy, you know. I'm not saying that you don't have to be a Christian or do be a Christian. I'm thinking that it's not really beneficial to you unless you can come up with what God is to you. Figure out what God and the goddess, all there is to you. Do you believe in 7? Do you believe in 2? Do you believe in 1? Do you believe in the All Mind and the All Mind created other ones to govern this realm? Do you believe there's aliens everywhere? Do you believe there's people in the earth? What do you believe in? Figure it out. Stop listening to others and letting them tell you what they think the world is. And if it's popular enough, then you go with it. Or you argue against it. Figure out within you what you want to do. This is why you look at magical systems. If one rings true to you, you can start doing some of the processes. But ultimately, you're doing what's right for you. And if you don't want to do that, then you need to start meditating every day. And then start having this cross-communication. Once you have that cross-communication, anything is possible. You can simply do, like I said, you can do sigils without that cross-communication, but you're going to be better off if you have that cross-communication. You can do sigils and all these other little types of magic that I said, but you're better off if you're doing these rituals because they stop external forces from fucking with you. And there's no harm in doing the initiation phase of the Kabbalah Great Work of Self-Transformation and stopping after the initiation phase. So if all you do are just the initial initiation exercises while doing magic, you can literally stop there and just keep whatever. But you'll get to a point where it's not enough. Like I said, that's what I thought. And it wasn't enough. And then I had to get more and more and more. And then there's only so much info you can get on YouTube. And even if you start buying programs, it's how to manifest, it's how to do this, it's how to do that. No one can teach you how to get evolved. No one can teach you how to reach enlightenment. You got to figure that out. And the only way you're going to figure that out is inside of you. That's also how you're going to figure out how God is. And God wants you to fight with him. God is good and God is bad. He's both. How could he be anything but? We're made in his image. What are we? Good and bad. And you say, well, that's a line from the Bible. Well, so even the other books older than the Bible say we're made in their image. If you go by Aradia, Gospel of the Witches, it's a story about the moon and the girl Messiah that came down. The moon's daughter, Aradia, she came down. Well, she doesn't have to come down. She was a part of the moon. She could have stayed up there. But she got sent down here to teach people witchcraft. Who knows if that's real or not? Probably not. It's probably just mythology to teach people shit, or just to come back at the fucking Christians because of their fucking doctrine and book. But nonetheless, she came down in human form. Well, what are these stories telling us? Well, we are all, in the Old Testament, I believe we're God. We're God. We're God. Because God is angry and he can do all these things. He can kill people, he cannot kill people. I believe the enlightened one in that book, people that realize their power, they're fucking God. And the rest of the people that are the swine are the sheeps. And then you got the people that are the prophets in between, something to that effect. And I mean, that's just a stupid little theory that I haven't given much thought to, but it seems like we're God and Adam in that one story. I think you have to take every story individually and figure out what it is. But I listened to this one guy on here, Epiphany Lectures, I think it was, and he would go through how the Bible is so, some people say it's all about astrology, and there's so much in there that is astrological. And if you get to a spot where it's like, it's not really astrological, that's much this story. Well, this guy, Epiphany Lectures, breaks it down where it's fucking autonomy-based biology within your body. He goes into the etymology of words and how these words, the old Latin words, mean a part of your body or a gland or a system and all this shit. And it's so insane. And if that ends, then it goes to metaphor. I think I recorded a part where Jordan Peter says in the year 300, one of the people that were part of the Bible, putting the canons together, whatever, said on record at that time that these are metaphors. And, it's information like that. When I find it, it makes me think, like, all the people saying Christianity's been used to oppress people all these years. Yet, on record, there's so many places where it says this Bible is metaphors. It's like, okay, well, who and why did it all of a sudden stop being metaphors and started being history? What was the point of that? I don't know. Once again, I'm not trying to honor the Bible. I think the Bible caused a lot of bad shit, but you need to learn how to wrestle with the God. And when you wrestle with God, you're wrestling with that part of yourself. And you have to get in touch with that part of yourself. You gotta figure out what the fuck you want in life. You gotta figure out what problems you got, and you gotta fucking fix them. You gotta figure out what you fucking believe in, so people can't just pass their beliefs on to you. You got a lot of work to do. It's time to get going. And while you're doing it, take up sigil magic. Simple way to fucking do things. Look at the guys that I promote on here, and you'll learn all these different types of magics that you can do while you're learning this shit. If it doesn't help you, or you don't figure it out, or if it's not for you, well then find a system that is for you. If you're unhappy, you need to figure out why. And you can ask yourself questions, and it will answer you. And you'll figure out the answers. Go to bed, have a book bed beside your bed for just asking questions. Write the question in there the day before, and you'll probably get the answer in the morning. And, there's a lot of wealthy people that go to bed right before bed. They got a book where they write down all the things they know that they have to do the next day. And when they wake up, they already know how to resolve these things. They already know, it's already planned for them. Because as you... I forget the saying. As you say it, so it becomes real. Kind of what abracadabra means, and so it's written, so it shall be done. As it's written, so shall it be done. Do you know how many people read that in the Bible, in other books, and put faith and belief into it, even if they don't believe it and use it in their life? People see that, believe the Bible, so by default, they believe that statement. Therefore, if you write things, it'll fucking be real. So take up these easy little tips that I dish out in all my episodes, mostly my beginning episodes on my podcast, but I got fucking playlist on here, carving candles and showing you how I kept manifesting on bingo tickets. You don't even want to know how often I went on bingo tickets. It's fucking insane. Fucking insane. It's like I can't lose. If I lost, that would be a surprise now. Anyways, that's it for today. Not a great video, but No, not bad, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to get at here. And, don't let anybody tell you what to believe. From COVID to fucking religion to what team you should fucking be watching or playing for, what you should do in life. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. You are the ruler of your own universe. You are your own fucking universe. You've got more than 7 billion fucking cells in your body. You're responsible for all of them. Now, they take care of themselves pretty damn well. But if you make mistakes consciously, then you can fuck them all up. Anyways, I think that's enough for today. I'm getting tired. My eyes are closing. So, have yourselves a great fucking day. I might leave you with a few Peterson clips where he talks about wrestling with God and the limbic system a little bit and about the cells in your body, maybe a few other little things, but I won't go over 15 minutes. I promise you that. If you don't want to watch it, we'll just cut it off here. Have a great fucking day.
Lucifer. Now, the status quo, the pagan PR people, whatnot, for years have established, something very clearly that we are all supposed to say when asked this question. We, as witches, do not believe in Satan. True. True. That has been true for quite some time. Satan is the all-evil entity, opponent of Jehovah, Hasatan, the adversary of God, is not something that exists in our belief system, but something that does exist in our belief system. Thought forms, also called servitors. And then one up from that, don't be texting me. Texting me while I'm on the fucking YouTube, dude. Sorry about that. Thought forms. And then egregores. You know what those are, kids? I should have visual displays. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of pretty much ranting. The egregore. E-G-R-E-G. Gregor. Try. You know what? If you Google it, Google's great with helping you spell it right. But did you mean? And it'll tell you. Egregores. Now do a little work. Do a little looking. If you don't know what an egregore is, I want you to look for squat. The god squat. Or I'm sorry, goddess squat. And then I want you to look at scram, score, sarge. There are several American deity forms that exist now that had previously been what a witch would call an egregore, a thought form built to serve more than one person, a thought form built to serve the public, the populace, anybody that calls on it, an artificial deity, if you will. Thought forms have been known to break from their programming, gather energy from their worshippers, and do whatever the fuck they wanted to do if you didn't put a limitation on them. And the god squat. Excellent, excellent example. I believe it's Isaac Bonowitz that tells the story in Real Magic of, I think it's his coven that invented the great god squat in Berkeley back in the 80s as a parking deity to be launched to the world to see if it could become a god in its own right. Now, this squat has launched to the world, has transgendered itself, and is now a large, robust woman who likes limericks and dirty jokes. And what you do is you drive around looking for a parking spot, saying dirty jokes and limericks to squat. And squat's amazingly powerful, more powerful than a lot of your deity forms that are out there in the world. And on the East Coast, they actually have a chant and a hand thing. It's be hard to do when you're driving, but it's squat, squat, find me a spot. Squat, squat, find me a spot. It's Rochambeau. You do Rochambeau, but I don't know how you do that while you're driving. But I do know the limericks and the dirty jokes work great for squat. Now, squat was created, be launched into the world, draw energy from everybody that called upon squat to get larger and bigger and grow, and maybe break out of the artificial deity form and become a god. Squat did more than that. Squat became a goddess. Squat did not stay in the box because the box was too loose. But look up Squat. Fascinating story. Now, I ain't talking about Squat today. I ain't here to talk about. Okay, I talked about Squat, but I'm not here to talk about Squat. We're here to talk about Satan. Now, in that same concept, if we think of Satan as an egregore, if we think of Satan as an artificial concept created by humankind as a reservoir for all their guilt, for all their bad deeds, all the people that ever said the devil made me do it, blamed something bad on Satan, feared Satan, read about Satan, gave him energy, all the heavy metal songs about Satan, make that exist as an egregore at the very least, but large. If you think of all the world's guilt, all the people that assign everything bad that they do over to this thing has to exist now. It has to exist by all the other laws that we use in the craft for using egregores, thought forms, plenty of god forms or lesser, even what are called lesser deities exist very much on this. They're invented, pulled out of the greater whole because the people needed a little piece of God, and they gave it a name, and they gave it a body, and they gave it an image, and those things grow. Those things grow, and they may just grow beyond us. So, for witches to say that we don't believe in Satan, or Satan doesn't exist, it doesn't work for me anymore. Knowing what I know, that cannot be. And I know it's bad PR. But witches would just like there not to be a Satan so they don't get confused with Satanists anymore. The most common line we've heard for like 20 years, only recently has anybody spoken against it, is a witch was saying, when talking to the media, oh, we don't believe it, or we're not Satanists. Yeah, we're not Satanists. We don't eat babies. Or words to that effect. Kind of saying that Satanists eat babies. Or saying that witches say that Satanists eat babies. That in order for us not to get bagged on for our religious beliefs, we're going to bag on somebody else. That's fucked up. That's a terrible way to be, and if I have to explain to you how fucked up that is, to bash somebody else's belief systems to protect your own, it's not okay. I don't do that to Christians. I don't do that to anybody. Only in defense. Oh, there's my cue. I gotta go answer this call. Mary Part. Mary Meet again.
It certainly is the case. So the hypothesis that I've been developing with the Trinitarian idea is something like that the Trinitarian idea is the earliest emergence in image of the idea that there has to be an underlying cognitive structure that gives rise to consciousness as well as consciousness itself. And so what I was suggesting was that the idea of God the Father is something akin to the idea of the a priori structure that gives rise to consciousness. That's an inbuilt part of us, so that's our structure. You could think about that as something that's been produced over a vast evolutionary time span, and I don't think that's completely out of keeping with the ideas that are laid forth in Genesis 1, at least if you think about them from a metaphorical perspective. And it's hard to read them literally because I don't know what, there's an emphasis on day and night, but the idea of day and night as 24-hour diurnal, daytime and nighttime interchanges that are based on the earthly clock seems to be a bit absurd when you first start to think about the construction of the cosmos. So it just doesn't seem to me that a literal interpretation is appropriate. And I mean, it's another thing that you might not know, but many of the early church fathers, one of them, Origen in particular, stated very clearly, this was in 300 AD, that these ancient stories were to be taken as wise metaphors and not to be taken literally. Like the idea that the people who established Christianity, for example, were all the sorts of people who were biblical literalists is just absolutely historically wrong. I mean, some of them were, and some of them still are. That's not the point. Many of them weren't, and it's not like people who lived 2,000 years ago were stupid by any stretch of the imagination. And so they were perfectly capable of understanding what constituted something approximating a metaphor, and also knew that fiction, in some sense, considered as an abstraction, could tell you truths that nonfiction wasn't able to get at. unless you think that fiction is only for entertainment. And I think that's a big mistake to think that. So, all right, so here we go. So, yes, so with regards to the idea of God the Father, so the idea is that in order to make sense out of the world, you have to have an a priori cognitive structure. And that was something that Immanuel Kant, as I said last time, put forward as an argument against the idea that all of the information that we acquire during our lifetime is a consequence of incoming sense data. And the reason that Kant objected to that, and he was absolutely right about this, is that you can't make sense of sense data without an a priori structure. You can't extract from sense data the structure that enables you to make sense of sense data. It's not possible. And that's really been demonstrated, I would say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, since the 1960s. And the best demonstration of that was actually the initial failure of artificial intelligence. Because when the AI people started promising that we would have fully functional and autonomous robots and artificial intelligence back in the 1960s, what they didn't understand and what stalled them terribly until about the early 1990s was that it was almost that the problem of perception was a much deeper problem than anybody ever recognized. Because like when you look out at the world, you just see, well, look, there's objects out there. And by the way, you don't see objects. You see tools, just so you know. And the neurobiology of that's quite clear. You don't see objects and infer utility. You see useful things and infer object. So it's actually the reverse of what people generally think. But the point is that regardless of whether you see objects or useful things, when you look at the world, you just see it. And you think, well, seeing is easy because there the things are. And all you have to do is turn your head and they appear. And that's just so wrong that it's almost impossible to overstate. Like the problem of perception is staggeringly difficult. And one of the primary reasons that we still don't really have autonomous robots, although we're a lot closer to it than we were in the 1960s, is because it turned out that you actually have to have a body. You have to have a body before you can think. And even more importantly, you have to have a body before you can see. Because the act of seeing is actually the act of mapping the patterns of the world onto the patterns of the body. It's not things are out there, you see them, then you think about them, then you evaluate them, then you decide to act on them, and then you act. I mean, that you could call that a folk idea of psychological processing or perception. That is not how it works. Like your eyes, for example, one of the things they do is map right onto your spinal cord, for example. They map right onto your emotional system. So it's actually possible, for example, for people to be blind and still be able to detect facial expressions, which is to say for someone who's cortically blind, so they've had their visual cortex destroyed often by a stroke, they'll tell you that they can't see anything. But they can guess which hand you put up if you ask them to. And if you flash them pictures of angry or fearful faces, they show skin conductance responses to the more emotion-laden faces. And it's because, imagine that the world is made out of patterns, which it is. And then imagine that those patterns are transmitted to you electromagnetically, through light. And then imagine that the pattern is duplicated on the retina. And then that pattern is propagated along the optic nerve. And then the pattern is distributed throughout your brain. And some of that pattern makes up what you call conscious vision, but other parts of it just activate your body. And so, for example, when I look at this, whatever it is, bottle, that's the word. When I look at it, especially with intent in mind, as soon as I look at it, the pattern of the bottle activates the gripping mechanism of my hand, and part of the action of the act of perception is to adjust my bodily posture, including my hand grip, to be of the optimal size to pick that up. And it's not that I see the bottle and then think about how to move my hand. That's too slow. It's that I use my motor cortex to perceive the bottle, and that's actually somewhat independent of actually seeing the bottle as a conscious experience. So, anyways, the reason that I'm telling you all of that, and there's much more about that can be told. Rodney Brooks, he's someone to know about. He's a robotics engineer who worked in the 1990s, and he invented the Roomba, among many other things. So he's a real genius, that guy. And Brooks was one of the first people to really point out that to be able to have a machine that perceived well enough to work in the world, that you had to give it a body. And that the perception would actually be built from the body up rather than from the abstract cognitive perceptions down. And so, and that turned out to be the case. And Brooks built all sorts of weird little machines in the 1990s that didn't even really have any central brain, but they could do things like run away from light. And so they could perceive light, but their perception was the act of running away from light. And so perception is very, very, very tightly tied to action in ways that people don't normally perceive. Anyways, that's all to say that you cannot perceive the world without being embodied. And, you're embodied in a manner that's taken you roughly 3.5 billion years to pull off, right? There's been a lot of death as a prerequisite to the embodied form that you take. And so it's taken all that trial and error to produce something like you that can interact with the complexity of the world well enough to last the relatively paltry 80 or so years that you can last. And so I think about that as, and this may be wrong, but I think it's a useful, at least it's a useful hypothesis. I think the idea of God the Father is something like the birth of the idea that there has to be an internal structure that out of which consciousness itself arises that gives form to things. And if that's the case, and perhaps it's not, but if it's the case, it's certainly it's a reflection of the kind of factual truth that I've been describing now. And then, like I also mentioned, that I kind of see the idea of both the Holy Spirit and also of Christ, and most specifically of Christ in the form of the Word, as the active consciousness that structure produces and uses, not only to formulate the world, because we formulate the world, at least the world that we experience, we formulate, but also to change and modify that world, because there's absolutely no doubt that we do that, partly with our bodies, which are optimally evolved to do that, which is why we have hands, unlike dolphins that have, very large brains like us, but can't really change the world. We're really adapted and evolved to change the world, and our speech is really an extension of our ability to use our hands. So the speech systems that we use are, very well-developed motor, very well-developed motor skill, and generally speaking, your dominant linguistic hemisphere is the same as your dominant hand, and people talk with their hands, like me, as you may have noticed, and we use sign language, and there's a tight relationship between the use of the hand and the use of language, and that's partly because language is a productive force, and the hand is part of what changes the world. And so all those things are tied together in a very, very complex way with this a priori structure and also with the embodied structure. And I also think that's part of the reason why classical Christianity puts such an emphasis not only on the divinity of the spirit, but also on the divinity of the body, which is a harder thing to grapple with. It's easier for people to think, if you think in religious terms at all, that you have some sort of transcendent spirit that's somehow detached from the body that might have some life after death, something like that. But the Christianity in particular really insists on the divinity of the body. So the idea is that there's an underlying structure that's got this quasi-patriarchal nature, partly because it's for complex reasons, but partly because it's a reflection of the social structure as well as other things, and then that uses consciousness in the form particularly of language, but most particularly in the form of truthful language in order to produce the world in a manner that's good. And I think that's a walloping, powerful, powerful idea, especially the relationship between the idea that it's truthful speech that gives rise to the good, because that's a really fundamental moral claim. And I think that's a tough one to beat, man, because one of the things I've really noticed is, and it isn't just me, that's for sure, is that there's a lot of tragedy in life. There's no doubt about that. And lots of people that I see, for example, in my clinical practice, are laid low by the tragedy of life. But I also see very, very frequently that people get tangled up in deceit, in webs of deceit that are often multiple generations long, and that just takes them out. And so deceit can produce extraordinary levels of suffering that last for very, very long periods of time. And that's really a clinical truism, because Freud, of course, identified one of the problems that contributed to the suffering we might associate with mental illness with repression, which is kind of like a lie of omission. That's a perfectly reasonable way to think about it. And Jung stated straight out that there was no difference between the curative psychotherapeutic effort and supreme moral effort, including truth. Those were the same thing as far as he was concerned. And Carl Rogers, another great clinician who was at one point a Christian missionary before he became more strictly scientific, he believed that it was in truthful dialogue that clinical transformation took place, and and of course one of the prerequisites for genuine transformation in the clinical setting is that the therapist tells the truth and the client tells the truth, because otherwise how in the world do you know what's going on? How can you solve a problem when you don't even know what the problem is? And you don't know what the problem is unless the person tells you the truth. That's something really to think about in light of your own relationships, because if you don't tell the people around you the truth, then they don't know who you are. And maybe that's a good thing, because, well, seriously, people have reasons to lie, right? I mean, that aren't trivial. But it's really worth knowing that you can't even get your hands on the problem unless you formulate it truthfully. And if you can't get your hands on the problem, the probability that you're going to solve it is just so low. And so then I've been thinking about, as well, this idea has become more credible to me the longer I've developed it, the longer I've thought about it. The idea that there's, I'll go back. It's partly the idea that, well, let me figure out how to start this properly. Friend of mine, business partner, and a guy that I've written scientific papers with, very smart guy, took me to task, and I think I told you this a little bit, about using the term dominance hierarchy, which might be fine for like chimpanzees and for lobsters and for creatures like that, but not for chimpanzees even so much. And he said something very interesting. He thought that the idea of dominance hierarchy was actually a projection of a early 20th century quasi-Marxist hypothesis onto the animal kingdom that was being observed. And the notion that the hierarchical structure that you see that characterizes, say, mating hierarchies in chimps, for example, the idea that that was predicated on power was actually a projection of a kind of political ideology. And I thought, that really bugged me for a long time when he said that, because I'd really been used to using the term dominance hierarchy, and I thought, he told me all.
But I'll elaborate just a little bit more. I thought of a different thing to do here. Now, first of all, Urban Primitive by, there it is, Raven Caldera and Tannen Schwarzenstein. Great book. You want to learn about egregores. Now, they don't come out and they don't call them egregores here. What they are calling them is urban deities. Urban deities created in the modern age by the people of that age because they needed a deity to do that. That's important because we find out a lot about how deities evolve by experimenting with such things and by creating them ourselves artificially, and then seeing how powerful they become leads us to have to take a little bit of personal responsibility with our deities. What egregore creation does is forces the natural evolutionary process of a deity into an artificial form. We build an artificially formed deity in a magical structure. We assign a mythos to it, powers, a name, a body, an imagery, and then typically in chaos magic, recognizing that it's the belief in such an entity that makes it powerful. Chaos magic overemphasizes the belief. Once you create your artificial deity thought form, thought form is a personal creation. That's really hard to say. It's a personal thing. A thought form's your personal little ethereal people flying around. Now, an egregore is a big thought form made for more people. But here, they're calling them urban deities. And you got to check out this book, because right here we got Squat, the first one. And here, I'll read you just a little bit. It says, the triple urban goddess. The urban goddesses of America, or the urban goddess of America has 3 faces of great power. By name, Squat, Score, and Scram. Go on. 2 sirens. All right, Squat, Score, and Scram. Each of them is invaluable for the urban primitive to call on times of need. And like all deities, she will answer more often when called more often. Now here they got Squat, Score, and Scram. Squat, I can attest, predates this book. Some people have said that Raven Caldera actually invented these deities, but I can attest that Squat definitely predates this book. And actually, The squat that predates this book was a male deity. In this book, squat looks like this. So, by the laws of egregores, squat is so powerful, it went out into the world and became a tranny. It transgendered itself, and that's absolutely acceptable because these things have no limits. Now, on the gods, they've got Slick. He gets you through situation by being slick. Hey, that kind of guy. You know when you need to Screw. And Sarge. Sarge is great. Sarge is the male deity for kicking you in the ass, calling you a maggot, to get you out of bed in the morning and get you to work, or get you through whatever you need. When you need a kick in the ass to get you up that hill, you call on Sarge. Now, what Raven and them did is they either found some of these deities, maybe created them, who knows what, but they put it in a book and released it to the world. And that's the important part when creating an egregore. We need to release it to the world. And that's why I'm here. I'm not just here to talk about egregores. I think I said a lot about egregores in my previous video. Go watch it. You also learn a little bit about Satan, which I don't think, I think at least my take on it hasn't been taken by too many people, or hasn't been made by too many people. But here we have, I'm at 5 minutes already. Liber Scrape, the Book of Scrap. A book of shadows, or a book of shadows of the Circle A system of magic. My tradition that I created. Been at least 10 years in this inception. Before that, there was the Anarchistic Witches of America, was an offshoot. I did some experimenting before landing here. But here, every class for 10 years has created an egregore for the world, and we have released them in various ways so that other people can see their awesomeness, can worship with them, can call upon them when in need, and by doing so make that egregore more powerful, and hopefully someday to break out of the mold and become omniscient, omnipresent, and all kind of cool things. So I'm going to give you at least one. I don't know how fast I can read this, but my kids, under my direction, have created these egregores in the paper fashion. Now, this way of creating them, we write them down very specifically in a ritual space, and we direct energy toward that form. Sometimes we'll be visualizing the actual form of the creature in the middle of the room while we're channeling energy through our third eye or through our magical tools. Varying methods, but the important part is the making it in paper, the taking of the idea and then making it exist in between the worlds in maybe a magic book consecrated so that when you write stuff in it, it becomes existing, or it exists. I don't know, however you want to word that. All right, we're at 7 minutes and I gotta pause. Okay, so before anybody else comes in, this one's, let's see, this one has a birth date. This one was born on 1/30/03. So yeah, quite a few years out there with lots of people investing belief in him. And I'm gonna introduce you to this one, and I'll probably have to do be several parts just to introduce you to some of the new gods. Not all of these will I introduce you to. Some are our personal secrets, of course. But this is Eltsirb, ELTSIRB, Eltsirb. And here, by reading it, you'll kind of see the formula in creating those. So hopefully it's some learning, introduction and learning, introducing you to Eltsirb. I am Eltsirb. I am a product of the will of my creators. My realm is that of transportation. I sweep the path of danger with my individual spinning bristles. My gold-winged hard hat protects me. My body is a chrome-scrubbing bubble. I travel upon winged combat boot roller skates. I have jumper cable suspenders and a mithril loincloth and cool driving gloves, and retractable SpongeBob-like legs. I carry my magic toolkit o' tricks in a bag betwixt my legs. I receive energy from driver Curtis Seltzer's Mark. In addition to being a witch full-time, I have an entire pantheon about, well, however much a pantheon's got to be, of artificially created deities, if there is a natural way. I think that the natural way for deities is to evolve out of those same ideas, out of human need. And in time, they evolve a face, a name, likes, dislikes. It can be said in one way that mankind created God. But at the same time, mankind didn't create God. Twisted, isn't it? It's both and neither. We play a part in that. We play a part in that evolution of our deity forms. And whether or not the image of them was once created by a human, or once drawn up by a human, or even just interpreted by a human. If you think about it, the first human to find a particular deity, well, they wrote that down. They wrote down something about that deity, or they recorded that. It could be that the recording is the creation. We don't know. But we know that we can play with these things. And egregores are propelled out there in the world doing their thing. Just like thought forms, they require a little maintenance. You got to call them back, got to give them some energy every so often. You should do some study other than just this video. But this has been to introduce you to just one of the new gods. And you go read Urban Primitive, you get to know that another pantheon of the new gods. Just as valid as the old gods. Matter of fact, with the new gods, we're able to give them more mythos. Your average pagan, or your average Celtic deity has maybe one story, or one piece of a story, and that's their entire mythos. We can do better. So, take Eltserv along with you for the ride, and I'll be back with some more. I'm thinking, maybe. Blessed be.